So, you want to start acrylics. I'm going to tell you the basic things that you really need to know about, which are the brushes, paints, palettes, all that stuff, what kind of papers you're going to need, canvases, all that stuff, and a last little tip that I don't think a lot of people know about. First, we're starting off with brushes. So for brushes, you don't really need much. Really, just like one or two brushes when you're starting out is enough. The brushes that I would recommend and that I really like to use is the flat brush and a round brush. They can help you with a lot of things, and that's really all you need when you're a beginner. For the kind of brands that you want to buy the brushes from, I can't really say that, because most of the brushes that I use are gifts, so I don't know where people got them from. But these are some things that you can look for in your brushes to make sure that they're like good quality. So like the first thing is that obviously you don't want them to have like weak bristles, as in like they fall out while you're painting. That can be really annoying, especially for acrylics, because acrylics dry super quickly. So if you leave the brush hair there, it just stays stuck there and it doesn't come out. If you kind of like run your finger through the brush and the bristles fall out, like don't get it, like because that's not the best kind of thing. That's what I do. And then the second thing that you want to look for in your brushes is that in acrylics, the brushes are they're a lot, at least for me, like personally, I like using softer brushes. Not like in oils where you would see that it's like a harder brush. So like if you're coming from like an oil painting background, just like make sure that you're not using the same brushes for acrylics, because at least for me personally, I've seen that most acrylic painters use softer brushes, not straight up like watercolor brushes, but softer brushes. Okay, so now for the paint, what kind of paint should you use? So I've been using this paint, this brand of paint for over a year now, and I really like it. It's better than a lot of other options that I've tried. When you're starting out, you don't want to get like a whole rainbow of colors. Just a primary set is fine. Red, blue, yellow, white, and then like a burnt sienna. One thing that you're gonna probably run into is that depending on what kind of red or blue or like yellow that you got, you're gonna be limited in what kind of colors you can make, because sometimes, like as an example, a certain red and a certain blue can make a really, really, really ugly purple. So that's like kind of a problem that I think you might run into, but I think that as a beginner you can kind of like, you don't really have to worry about the amount of like the kind of range of colors that you can make. Because I think it's a new medium. You should probably focus on learning that, and then later going on to kind of experiment with more variations of red or blues or yellows, blah blah blah. Even if you add white to them, they're just gonna come out looking different. But as if right now, as a beginner, I don't think you really need to worry about that yet. So just like keep that in mind, that it's gonna happen, but that you probably don't need to worry about it. If you really, really want to paint something like purple, for example, and you're not happy with the mix of purple that you can get with the red and the blue that you have, just buy a tube of purple and you're fine. Also, a little tip with the colors is that always get like a bigger white, because I think that that's something that is very obvious for most painters. You just get a bigger white, because white is probably the first color that you're gonna run out of, so it's always important to have more of that. For palettes, so for palettes, there's many kinds of palettes. There's glass palettes, plastic palettes, there's clay palettes, what else? I think what those are, I don't know. There are many kinds of palettes, but for acrylic specifically, I would recommend just like getting a normal plastic palette. I think that you don't really need to overcomplicate it that much. Just get a normal plastic palette and then that's fine. Though I do have a little tip though when it comes to palettes. If you are someone that comes from like an oil painting background and is kind of like struggling to readjust to kind of like the drying time of acrylics, because acrylics dry really quickly, you might really like this tip. This tip might be really, really useful. which is basically to get like a metal container and put a wet paper towel inside of the metal container, and then take a tiny piece of parchment paper that like fits into the, like it's like the size of the metal container, and you just put that over the paper towel, and you can mix your paints on top of that, and it will keep them wet for a lot longer, and I think that it's really useful. Obviously, I can't really help you so much with the drying time of when it's actually on the canvas or on the sketchbook. I think that there are mediums to make acrylics dry slower, but I think that those only give you a few more minutes, not really so much longer than what you would normally have in acrylics of like the drying time. As for cleaning the palettes, I think for me personally, because I don't sell the paints, because I have heard that if you sell your paints, this is kind of bad to do, but I don't sell them, so what I do is I just paint on top of multiple layers in the palette, and then I just scrape it off, because I think that that's like the easiest way. I think that it looks cool, and then when you take it off, I think that it is the most clean, personally, because I have noticed that if I wash it right after mixing it, it leaves kind of like a stain, and I don't like that kind of look. And if you try to scrape it off with too little layers, it doesn't come off that seamlessly, and it's not as satisfying. So I really like to just layer. But the thing that I said that to be aware of when you're doing that, if you're gonna do like the layers, is because probably as a beginner you're not going to be selling your paintings quite yet, but I have heard that when you're mixing a lot of paint, sometimes the layers underneath can like kind of like crack open, kind of, if that makes sense, and you can get little chunks of dried paint in your normal paint. And and I've heard that if you want to sell your art and somebody sees that, it's kind of like a red flag and they don't want it anymore. But I'm assuming that because you're a beginner, you're probably not going to sell your art quite yet. I don't know. And so, but that's just kind of like a thing to be aware of. So as for the sketchbooks or canvases and stuff like that that you want to be using, I would recommend getting a sketchbook that says mixed media, because that should have paper that can take acrylic paint. I think that you should probably use a sketchbook for a while until you kind of get more used to the medium. And one thing though, you do want to protect your paintings. I use parchment paper, like a little piece of parchment paper, and I kind of tape it into the sketchbook to protect it, because if you paint on both sides of the page and then they're like touching, they kind of get stuck together, and then they can like peel off paint from the other kind of painting. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll show you. Obviously, you don't want your paintings to get butchered. You don't want that. Ideally, you do not want that. As for canvases, I don't really recommend getting a canvas so early on as a beginner. I think that painting on paper feels a lot different than painting on a canvas. So I feel like before, like if you paint on paper and you don't like it, before like you quit or say that acrylics aren't for you, try on canvas or like on something else, because it is different. So basically, in conclusion, for the canvases and sketchbooks is that there's a lot of stuff out there. You don't need to overcomplicate it. Just get a sketchbook, a normal sketchbook that says mixed media. If you want a canvas, don't overcomplicate it. Just get a normal canvas from your local art store and just use that. There's a bunch of stuff out there that as you get more experienced, you might want to try out, but as of right now, just get the normal stuff and you'll be fine. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this. I think that I've only seen one lady talk about this, and it's how you're supposed to get rid of your paints, basically. When the paint is dry, you can just throw it away. It doesn't really do anything. I've never heard of it affecting the environment or doing anything like that, so you can just throw it away and be fine. But when you're mixing like the paint in like a water, you kind of want to be careful of how you get rid of it, because it can affect your sink and the environment. What you want to do is that after you finish painting and you leave all of your paint water kind of there, you don't throw it away immediately. You let it sit just for a little bit. You let it sit. You take all of your brushes out of the cup and everything. You just let it sit there, and over time, all of the acrylic that is in the cup is going to sink to the bottom. And then once that has happened, you can take the cup to the sink and kind of slowly kind of drop the water into the sink. But just making sure that acrylic that's at the bottom doesn't go into the sink. And then when you are done with that, when all of the water is out of the cup and it's just the acrylic that's left over in the cup, you can take like a towel or a paper towel, whatever, and you can just kind of like wipe off the acrylic. And sometimes I'll even, me being lazy, I'll just let it dry. I really recommend having a towel. You can reuse that towel and then wash it, and so then you can just like reuse it all the time for that. And then that way you're gonna keep your sink happy and also the environment happy, because acrylic in your sink is not grit, so don't do that. In conclusion, for everything that I've said, to give you kind of like a rundown of everything, start with 2 brushes. Don't overcomplicate it. Just make sure that they're good brushes that don't have the bristles, like super weak and that they're gonna fall out. Do that. 2 brushes, 1 brush, whatever, you're fine. Paints, get a primary palette like red, blue, yellow, and then a white, and then like a burnt sienna or another darker color that you can use to make darker colors, basically. And as for the canvases, papers, whatever, get a sketchbook, mixed media sketchbook. That's going to be really good for you. Practice on that, then later you can move on to canvases or gesso boards or all of the other stuff that people have to offer to paint on. But that really comes down to personal preference of what you like to use, so experiment with that once you're more experienced. And just remember to keep the environment in mind, and also your sink, and just get rid of the acrylic like I said, and you'll be fine. Okay, so yeah, that's the video. Thank you for watching. I hope that my tips were helpful. Don't forget to subscribe, like, or comment. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.